Hello, I'm Keith Robinson for KAPOL and Contact Mission. In recent years, there has likely been more work done in the field of apologetics on Genesis chapter 1 than any other passage in the Bible. This makes a good deal of sense. If we open a Bible, Genesis 1 is likely the first thing we will read. Not only that, this chapter deals with the very beginning of history and the creation of the universe. Many have asked, can I trust the story recorded in Genesis 1? Or if I can't trust what the Bible says about the beginning, why should I trust what it has to say on any other topic? Many great theologians have worked hard to answer those questions, and I am incredibly grateful for the work that they have done. Because so much apologetic work has been done on the biblical creation account, we do have several good, solid, plausible answers to those questions. But I also think, while we have worked so diligently to create an apologetic for Genesis 1, we have often neglected the original apologetic that exists in Genesis chapter 1. To truly appreciate this, we need to take a step back and think about how the book of Genesis as a whole would have been received by the first people who heard it, the original audience. Traditionally, this is understood to be the Israelites who were freed from slavery to the Egyptians by God and then led to the land of Canaan under the leadership of Moses. Assuming that traditional viewpoint is the correct one, we can get a picture of what these people have experienced, what beliefs they have been surrounded by or exposed to, and what issues they are going to face as they move forward. The biblical record states the ancestors of the Israelites originated in eastern Mesopotamia, specifically Ur of the Chaldeans. Abraham and his family left there and migrated to the land of Canaan, and a few generations later, his family migrated again to the land of Egypt, where they apparently spent quite a bit of time, and of course eventually became enslaved. Now all three of these regions, Egypt, Canaan, and Mesopotamia, had very complex religious ideas and beliefs about the creation of the universe prior to the writing of the biblical book of Genesis. Consequently, the Israelites had been exposed to and potentially even believed in these other ancient creation myths. So here are some of the highlights. One of the biggest themes that appears in most of them is that of chaos. All three regions, Egypt, Canaan, Mesopotamia, were polytheistic. They believed in multiple gods, sometimes dozens or more. And these gods were often viewed as being similar to their human counterparts, meaning they had outbursts of emotion. They quarreled, they warred with one another. They could be petty and hold grudges. They might play tricks on each other. When it comes to creation, one god might make something that another disliked, and so they would fight over what it should be or do. This was especially true of the creation of humanity. In the Epic of Atrahasis, for example, humans are created by the gods because the gods are tired of working for themselves, and they want servants. But not long after, the newly created humans are making too much noise. They're disturbing the gods' rest. So one of them decides to just wipe out the humans with a flood. Humanity is only spared because another god warns one of the humans, Atrahasis, so that he can make preparations to survive the flood. It's very reminiscent of the biblical account of the flood during the time of Noah, though obviously it does play out very differently. In Egypt and Canaan, similar stories appear, stories of gods at war, vying for power and control, creating the universe chaotically, sometimes by accident, sometimes as a way to gain that power and control, sometimes because they're just bored and they want something to do. These are the stories the Israelites would have been surrounded by, stories they would have heard told again and again by the people they came into contact with, stories that a great many people believe to be true. Though there are some superficial similarities, such as the existence of a global flood, all of these stories are, from beginning to end, incompatible with the account that is given in the Bible. So, as God brings the Israelites out of Egypt and into Canaan, he prompts Moses to record a great many things for them, an account of their wanderings, laws to be obeyed, the institution of their priestly and sacrificial systems, and a history of their people. But he begins with creation. And God's creation account is markedly different from those other accounts. One of the words that describes God creating things is a special word the Bible only uses when God makes something entirely new. The way God creates is through issuing commands, decrees. It looks and sounds like a king sitting on his throne saying the old-fashioned, "So let it be written, so let it be done." God decrees, "Let there be light, let there be water and dry ground, let there be fish and birds and animals." When we get to the creation of mankind, God uses the royal we, the plural of majesty, and says, "Let us make man in our image." It pictures God as a king making his proclamations, which are then carried out in the real world. This is very different than the stories of Canaan, Egypt, or Mesopotamia. There, the gods fight and they struggle to create. They have to work at it. They are not powerful enough to just speak things into existence. On the especially big aspects of creation, they have to set aside their differences and work together, because even the gods are not powerful enough to do it on their own. Often there is no specific grand plan or purpose. Creation happens on a whim or in response to a need that some god has. Chaos reigns before anything is created. Chaos is central to how creation happens, and therefore chaos is what we still have once creation is complete. But let's compare that with the biblical record. When we read through Genesis 1, not only do we notice that the language is often rather unique, but that the whole passage is uniquely structured. There is a systematic point being worked out here. It begins in verses 1 and 2, the introduction to the structure. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. It's essentially the ancient equivalent of a thesis statement or opening summary. The earth was formless and void. Literally, the earth was unformed and unfilled. And this is actually a play on words in Hebrew. It says the earth was tohu and bohu, without form and empty. This is the problem of chapter 1. And so the rest of the chapter goes about fixing it. Days 1 through 3 focus on forming the earth. Part of the tohu, according to verse 2, is darkness. So God creates light. The earth has no form, it is shapeless. So God on day 2 separates the waters from the land, the earth from the heavens, to define it, to give it shape. On day 3, God completes the formation process by creating plants to grow on the earth. And now that the earth is formed, he can fix the bohu part, the emptiness. He can start filling it. On day 4, he fills the heavens with the greater light and the lesser light and the stars. On day 5, he fills the air and the water with birds and fish, respectively. On day 6, he fills the land with animals of all sizes. And then he creates man. In addition to that, these creative days correspond to one another. On day 1, God fixes the light formation problem by creating light. On day 4, he fixes the light filling problem by creating things that bear light, the sun, the moon, the stars. On day 2, God fixed the formlessness of the earth by making it separate and distinct from the heavens, from space. He created a sky and seas and such. On day 5, God fixed the emptiness of the earth by filling the sky and the seas with birds and fish. Days 3 and 6 are both two-parters. Day 3a, God fixed the formlessness by separating land and water. Day 3b, God continues it by creating plants to grow on the land. On day 6a, God fills the land by creating land animals. And on day 6b, God finishes filling the land by creating humans, the pinnacle of creation. In addition to that, everything that is created serves a purpose. Everything has a reason. Light, so there won't be only darkness. The sun, moon, and stars to help us tell time. They're there to mark days and seasons and years, as well as to provide light. God brings up vegetation, which will be needed for food for all of the animals. God creates spaces for animals to live in, the skies, the waters, the land. God creates the birds, the fish, the animals. They serve the purpose of filling the earth, of enjoying God's creation. And then God creates mankind, plural, in God's image. as the pinnacle of his creative work. It is not until God creates humanity that he says his creation is very good or that it is complete. And he gives humans several purposes, several reasons to exist. They are to be fruitful. They are to multiply. They are to rule over the rest of the creation and to tend it for God. They are to be his stewards. When humans sin and fall, those things don't go away either. Rather, we are still meant to do these jobs God gave. They simply have now become more difficult. This account is very different than all of the other options that were available in the ancient world. And going back to our original premise, these differences are not only intentional, they are apologetic in nature. The biblical creation account is a defense of God's worthiness to be worshiped, because he truly has made all things. It is an explanation of God's superiority, his sovereignty. Like any good defense, it pokes holes in other stories. The gods of Egypt and Canaan and Mesopotamia are not worthy of worship. They don't even exist. And God is careful to draw that out in his version of the story. Instead of the constant chaos that exists in the midst of the time, God's account shows an incredible orderliness and attention to detail. Instead of the difficulties and wars and struggles the gods go through, the God of the Bible is able to create simply by speaking. And when it comes to humanity, instead of be creating by a whim, by an accident, being viewed as just tools to serve in the God's never-ending battles, our God says humanity is the crown jewel of his creation, special above all the rest of what he has accomplished, the ones who alone bear his image in his creation. It is a very different story. And for the ancient Israelites, it is a story that would be vital to both their faith and their identity as God's people. The apologetic within the biblical creation account is something that could be pointed to whenever they were tempted to turn to idolatry or to worship of the pagan gods. It tells the story of the origins of the universe, yes, but perhaps even more importantly, it points to the creator of that universe. It argues for the existence of one God who alone brings about existence. And while we may still have many questions about Genesis 1 and the need for more apologetic studies for Genesis 1, we should not neglect the apologetic the text itself gives us, nor the God it points us to. Once again, I am Keith Robinson with KAPOL in Contact Mission.